other questions?
Yeah, I wondered if you ever, there's a piece called Perfect Health by Deepak Chopra, and he talked about an experiment with mice, and I guess they were given cancer cells to see. It was not an experiment that was done to prove something psychic. It was just an experiment on these cancer cells, introducing them into the rats. I guess they were rats, to see how quickly they would, decay or something, so they could do medical research. And one group of rats did fine. They didn't actually have any kind of, they didn't die, and they couldn't figure out why. And then they looked at the film footage, and they found out that the one worker who looked after that group of rats took them out and petted them and thought they were cute, and gave them love and said, oh, and put them back in, and they didn't die. And all the rest of the rats were treated the same, just fed. The other rats were had people come in and just feed them and whatnot. But I mean, as far as the scientific procedure, the rest was the same. So that was the only difference.
Interesting story. I mean, we'd like to think that our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions can have effect on other people, but I think with more and more of these, it looks as if there's we prove either here or on the way.
Psychosomatic effects are like totally accepted. I think they're actually accepted by science, because we have placebos and they've been used for ages, but then they're denied in the next sentence. That your mind can really affect your body, and you have to have medicine, but your mind totally can affect you.
And haven't there been studies about healthcare workers observing prayer groups or people trying to help the sick, and those that have been prayed for did recover better than those who weren't?
I think so.
There's lots of stuff like that.
Dr. Rodin's done some work on that. Yeah,
and then meditation groups in New York bring the crime rate down and stuff.
Yeah. There's many kind of these experiments where they're doing group focused, coherent thoughts, and certain crime rates go down. And I think there's Christian groups and there's transcendental movement have done a lot of research in that.
There's also a phenomenon with crystals where if one crystal changes, I'm not quite sure what it is. I'm not I don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but when one crystal changes in this part of the world, all the other crystals change, and it's like all crystals are totally connected.
Let's talk about morphic resonance.
We have crystals in our hair.
Oh really? Yeah, I think that's moving morphic resonance is the idea that once something is learned to a certain degree amongst members of a social group, the members of it will be open to a certain social field, morphic field, from which they can automatically tap into once a certain tipping point is reached. And that's the theory put forward anyway by Rupert Sheldrake, his theory about morphic resonance. As you put me forward to that, so you know.
Okay, other questions?
I wasn't sure who ran the experiments. I must have missed that part with the computer spiking. Who was doing, or what was that?
Roger Nelson.
Yeah, Dr. Roger Nelson.
So he just put a computer on and it was...
Okay, Dr. Roger Nelson is the head of the research, and there's basically a group of scientists who are working collaboratively. I don't know exactly how many, but I think there's 60 to 80 computers running around the world on a network, and so they're combining their resources into one.
What they set it up to measure? They just set it up to measure the feel and the what?
Okay, what the computers are doing, all the computers are doing, is pushing out zeros or ones on a random basis. So that's all those computers are doing. So, but when there's a convergence, is big spikes, they say, is when world events happen where everyone's attention's on that event, and there's convergences within those numbers that are statistically significant and proven, albeit small.
Why are there computers pushing out zeros and ones randomly?
It's a random. It's called a random number generator.
Okay, so they just put on a random number generator
Yeah.
and then just decided to leave it going.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And there's about I believe 60 to 80. I can't remember exactly how many, and they're dotted all around the world.
Okay. Okay, now I understand.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up right at this moment. I was waiting for us to get on to that, and I guess this isn't so much of a question, though I wish you would comment on it. Terence McKenna, though now Terence McKenna is dead, and though his brother has sort of criticized Terence McKenna's work, it doesn't really matter. Terence McKenna had this computer program called Time Wave Zero, I think it was called. And I can't remember exactly what it measured, but basically moments of uniqueness. Alex and I have talked about this many times, and I can never remember exactly what it measured.
Novelty.
Novelty, thank you very much. I want to call it uniqueness, but novelty is exactly what it was. So it's kind of the same thing, and I don't know if Terence McKenna was working with Rupert Sheldrake or what, but it's a very similar thing. So
They were associates.
they were. So maybe it's based on the same random number generators. I don't know. But Terence McKenna was like, look at this spike here. This is this is World War II. Look at this spike. So Terence McKenna talked about it as being measured in terms of global consciousness, and then at some point it goes down to zero. So there's no more novelty left in the world, right? Every novel thing that could possibly happen has happened at some point in the future.
Well, in fairness, that date was supposed to be 2012.
Supposed to be 2012.
Right?
Yeah, but that's the big criticism from Terence McKenna's brother, is that was just sort of made up by Terence McKenna. But anyway, at some point in the future, the way I understand it is because of global consciousness or collective consciousness, everyone will understand everything or something like that. Everyone will experience everything, and there will be no more novelty. So now you want to comment on that?
Well, some scientists would say just by the act of observing means it will create something to observe. So I would probably go along with that notion. I'd like to think there'll always be new things to know, but as I haven't studied him, I wouldn't be able to really comment too much.
Well, I guess it wasn't so much as that, but at some point when we reach the point where we all understand this set amount of stuff, then it goes into something else. Then we've reached into a different sort of measuring, a different way to measure things. The old ways of measuring things don't work anymore. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I would go for the idea that there's a field, a conscious field, where once there's enough information within that field, the tipping point happens where everyone begins to be able to access it within their consciousness at certain levels. Again, it's a kind of a hypothetical notion, but it is. These morphic fields are being put forward as a viable sort of theory, and there is some evidence to support that.
We have time for a couple more questions. Who else would like to ask questions?
I have a rather practical question about the magnetic field of the heart. How is that measured, or have there been any measurements how it changes through emotional, when the heart goes through emotional states? And definitely you can see the heartbeat will change, but what about this magnetic field?
I believe that
strong.
there is changes in the magnetic field as well, depending on one's emotions. The only thing I can say to put forward to you is you can have a look at the Heart Math Foundation, and they've been the pioneers in researching the way the heart responds to emotions on a sort of magnetic and sort of, I guess, scientific way. But the field goes on it actually goes out into the
So
world
they will
and it
just
spreads.
put some electrons or measures somewhere on the body.
Well, at the time they said, it said, oh, it's got this diagram here, and it's because at the time it was like 6 to 8 feet, but apparently Braden asked, oh, why is it only 6 to 8 feet? Well, we don't know. It could be much more. It's just that's how much our equipment are capable of measuring at this time. So I'm not sure if this diagram is actually a fair representation.
But it's because a lot of consciousness is also about communication, and it's a very obvious form of communication, of reading somebody's like body language or whatever, how the heart is beating. It's somebody you can see or sense. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to look forward to look at that in more detail. There's so many aspects to this, and I think one of the main points that science and scientists, I'm obviously not a scientist, but is that scientists are saying is in this field is that the disciplines are so fractured that scientists only know usually a certain amount of information only about their specific subject, and they don't know anything. So, for example, a physicist will know lots about their specific field, but know nothing about biology, and they know nothing about psychology or linguistics, and they not be able to see the bigger picture. And so what they'll do is they'll say, well, for example, a biologist will go, well, it's the speed of light, that's the constant, and you can't go faster than the speed of light. That's, quantum entanglement is a load of rubbish because, you can't, everyone knows you can't go faster than the speed of light. And it's this kind of mentality which needs to, I think, somehow change. And in order to understand this as people, I think we've got to draw on different fields, and then we get a better sort of overall view, I think, personally.
More questions?
Well, I would say quantum entanglement is actually a really good example of the kind of evidence that, personally as a skeptic of some shades of this, I would need. Quantum entanglement was something that, before there was any proof of it, was completely laughed at by the scientific community. The idea that you can violate the speed of light, that signals can be sent faster than the speed of light, violates the basic premise of relativity. But then there was experimental data, and now it's been proven and we know it exists. So we changed our model. We're like, oh, okay, well, that was all wrong. Well, this is science, not dogma, so let's change it. So it's changed. So if there was, that's why I mentioned replicatable evidence. So maybe if there was more research into this, more funding, and this could be repeated, then the model, the current model would be changed. Because you'd have no choice. There'd be so much overwhelming evidence.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, it has been proven. I think there's no harm in doing more evidence because people's mindsets are, I think, it seems that they are quite slightly entrenched in this mechanistic sort of reductionist, theories of, you can't go past X, you can't go past the speed of light. So yeah, you've got a good point there. So,
I'm really glad that you just mentioned that because this time that you've been giving this speech and mentioning the speed of light, you have to remember that it's the constant is in a vacuum. Only in a vacuum is it at this speed, because when light travels through different materials, it actually travels at a different speed. Okay. So, like light traveling through water travels at a different speed than in a vacuum, or light traveling through a crystal travels at a different speed. Now, the interesting thing is if we want to say, like, how could it travel faster? Well, maybe it's traveling through a medium that it can travel faster through. If we know that light, if it's a constant in a vacuum and we know it goes slower through all of these other mediums, well, why not be able to go faster through a medium that we don't understand?
That's a good point. Perhaps perhaps, I go with the notion that, logically speaking, they say that the Big Bang, everything was contained within a pea size. So if that was the case, that before, at one point, everything was contained within a pea size, we are already in some way entangled with everything already. and then when everything sort of spreads out, and so we have this, in some way, innate entanglement, because at one point, according to the Big Bang Theory, we were in a way entangled. It's just a theory. We need, obviously, there needs to be more research done on that. So.
We have time for maybe 2 more questions. 1 more question or 2 more questions? Go ahead.
I forgot, but there was a recent discovery of a really big one about the field. What's it called? The Bosonian field or something?
Higgs boson.
Higgs boson field. That's
yeah.
it. The Higgs boson field. So isn't that actually exactly what we're talking about?
Yeah, this could be the field, what Brodin calls the divine matrix or the morphic field, or there's many different names for it. But there is evidence that there's this field that we're all, in some way, all connected to, and we all feed off, and that it's an evolving field. It's not something it's something that is sort of continually gets updated, just like your internet gets added new pages, so does this field. And you can talk about your inspiration, for example. Where do you get that inspiration? Is that coming from the field? Is it just a coincidence that, you know, when they invented the steam engine, there were 5 different patterns already available at that exact time for the steam engine? Maybe that there was enough information within the field that some people, very bright thinkers, could tap into it. I don't know, but I think in our lifetimes it will be interesting to follow, and to. I just think it's a very interesting subject.
Yeah, people that discovered DNA were on LSD when they sort of came from the knowledge that came from the insights rather than.
There you go.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah, the mind-altering drugs. That's another. That's a talk for another another thing. But there's definitely
practical.
But yeah, the scientific world includes, they're a bit reticent. Like, for example, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's speech, he got it banned from the TED Talk.
Yeah.
Why did he get it banned?
Yeah.
He's at Cambridge University. He's like a don at Cambridge University, best universities in England. You know, the guy's.
Well, Richard Dawkins is the head of public understanding of science, ironically.
Oh right.
I think he has something to do with it.
Possibly, yeah.
From what I've read, because I've been following, I'm friends with. I guess this is there's no point of this being on video actually, so never mind. I'll leave that. I'll leave that be. But why don't you say something final?
Okay.
Where would you like to move forward, or where have these studies put you now?
Okay. So to conclude. The scientific experiments kind of show that the mind is not really in our head, so to speak. We are actually participating, our consciousness is participating. It comes out into the real world, and there's still a lot of information to know. And I think the final thing would be, let's try to break down some dogmas and try to be a bit more open-minded, and see ourselves as active, participating, powerful beings in an evolving universe planet. That's all I've got to say, I suppose.
Okay,
Thank you very
good.
much.
Thank you.